Well, chapter 100 of 100 Years Quest was like way more out of left field than I thought, because I figured it was going to be like, again, the idea of reinforcements onto both sides or something, or there was going to be something kind of like, out of the labyrinth, maybe out of Dogromeg's body, like there's some form, like what if there was a type of zombie dragon or like some form of corpse dragon? Because we know that there are like odd types of dragons like that, Scullion being the corpse dragon. And maybe it like went into there, and because its effect, it like made like a bunch of them, maybe like a bunch of small ones, and it's where they were hiding. And it's like, oh, they merged with some of the power because the Dogromeg's dead and how they work, and brought those back. I don't know, something. I didn't think Ignia, because like Ignia was one that was out of any theory that I could have had. Like I know some people were having the idea of like other dragon gods showing up. A lot of people were saying Viernez though more than Ignia, but like the idea of another dragon god showing up to me would be too much, because I figured like this was going to be obviously more set on the guilds and not on like Celine's activities. That's why she was going to be a spectator again, and then we were going to see her do stuff before she ends up having to actually like doing stuff on the side before she actually has to do anything like power-wise in any situation. But now Ignia's here, and where that chapter was very crazy, because like also I didn't think it was going to be as focused on Natsu and Suzaku first. I thought we were going to get to Lucy and Kyria first. So like my predictions were definitely off for that chapter. Like it was still obviously like the big plot twist, the aspects of the Kyria and Lucy fight somewhat are going the way that I believe, and as well as Natsu and Suzaku's fight in general, it's going about as like the direction and like level of difficulty I was expecting, with like Natsu actually knowing not to try and fight this dude in base. But the Ignia arrival was like the big thing that I just didn't think it was going to be another dragon god because of the situation they were in. And now there's like, well, they can't, like none of the main cast or like anybody from either guild, the Diablos or Fairy Tail, can fight Ignia at all. The only character, I mean, if you say guild, because obviously Celine's sort of the now guild master, but the only character really there at all can fight Ignia is Celine. And that's why I was saying that Celine would have to go fight him, because one of the reasons I was like, well, I don't know about the idea of a dragon god showing up, because it leads to one of those automatic responses. A character should have to have a response that they're going to have based off of what you know about them if they're put in one of these scenarios. And exactly here, that's why I was so happy to use this panel. I didn't use anything from Ignia, Natsu, or Lucy, any of them. I wanted to use this panel as my favorite one for this chapter, because it was something I believed. It was a theory, but it was not just a theory on what I think was going to happen. It's a theory on what I think has to happen. It was like, if this happens, this has to be the response. Because Celine isn't like, she's not a pushover. She's not going to just sit back and just let this happen. She's going to go and prevent Ignia from intervening with her plans. Like, she has her own thing going on. She is one of the 3 strongest known characters in the world, not counting Oxrong. We don't really know anything about Oxrong, just his name. But really, the only people right now that can respectively stop the movements of one of the dragon gods is another dragon god. And right now, we only have 3 of them, and one of them is now in front of her, and she has to go deal with them. So I'm super hyped for that fight, because I mean, that fight in general is going to be really interesting, just to see like how it goes down. We're going to get to see some real flex from Ignia for the first time. I know we saw a little bit, like he vaporized most of Mercephobia's ocean, just kind of getting his wings all stretched out and stuff. But we didn't really see anything in his like fighting style or anything. I assume he's going to fight kind of like Natsu. That just makes sense to me, because similar to Acnologia, if he was going to fight Acnologia, he knows that he would be fighting a Dragon Slayer, so he probably learned to fight more like a Dragon Slayer. That's one of my beliefs, that Ignia's human form is stronger than the other Dragon God's weaker forms, like the weaker Alderaan form with the God Seeds down, or Mercephobia, in his human form. I still think Ignia, specifically in his human form, in that weaker form, his weaker form having a larger standing of his true power, I think would make sense just by the nature of his character. And I don't know, we'll see how that goes. If they go to their dragon forms, because the reason that I said like the match between the 2 of them is potentially the biggest match we've ever had. I brought it up a little bit ago, like before I started this on Twitter, because like I say potentially, because if they fight in base, or not in base, because I guess their base is the dragon forms technically, But if they start in their weaker forms, then it's not going to be the biggest fight, because I would say like the biggest fight in that case really was fresh Natsu and Suzaku, because we know Suzaku is actually technically no, I can't even say like Georg, like fight, like an actual battle. I guess I know, because Irene is definitely not at that level either, really, because she was up against Akalogia, he's a big jump, but really because these two are going to be around level, I would assume, even in their weaker forms. And I don't think Celine, if getting pushed by Ignia, wouldn't go into her dragon form. I don't think it would make sense. She has no reason to just stick to her humanoid form. Same thing with Ignia. You also have to keep in mind, these are two dragons, and we don't know how old. Like, Ignia is at least 400 or so, whereas Celine, we have no idea. She could be hundreds more. She could be thousands. We don't really know how old a lot of these really old dragons are. We don't even know the life expectancy of a dragon. We don't know if it's like when they die of old age within the story. That's something completely unknown to us right now. Even still to this day in the story, we don't really know anything about like dragon lifespans. Like, I wish we did, just because it would make things kind of easier to kind of gauge. But I'm kind of fine with it. Well, it's not a big deal. It's just one of those like things. If we ever do find out, I'll be happy. But if we don't, like I said, it's not a big deal. It doesn't do anything negative to the story. But yeah, so Celine and Ignia, I think at that point they're gonna look at this as a their dragon pride probably kind of thing, as a battle between two of their species. Not only that, they know that they're equal to each other. So I think that there's also like a level of just power, respect in play there. So we'll see how that fight's gonna go. That one I just have a lot to talk about and just theorize, because it's such a like it's a match that I would write in a fan fiction, and there's like so many things that you can kind of like gauge in those ideas. But like when it comes to fights, as like a fan theory idea, like the ones that are the biggest are always like the most fan fiction-y feeling. Like if Jalal and Laxus ever fight, even though that, because it's not like there's a current reason in the story for them to battle. Maybe at some point Jalal will show up and Laxus will be like, fight so I can get stronger to fight Kieran. Who knows? But other than that, I will say that Igni and Celine has been one of the hype ones, and it's just like people have been talking about it for a long time. Not nearly as long as obviously Laxus and Jalal, because that's existed since Fighting Festival probably, like that's been in the fandom. People have been wondering who would win in a match between these two, whereas like obviously Igni and Celine have been going around for so long. But yeah, I'm happy to see Celine is going to do that. And she told her little crow buddies like, hey, just get out of here, go, just get. Actually was like a little tiny character bit I liked about Celine, because it seemed like she was like, well, he was, he hung out with me while I was doing this. She didn't seem to have any ill intent, so she was nice to him. I actually like that. It makes Celine seem a little less crazy, a little bit more human. I mean, we already had this stuff about her being upset about the death and consumption of one of her children. But I mean, like, we didn't get that much of a response. We mostly just saw her anger side. Like, I wish we saw her maybe like a little bit like humanized, but just being polite, which kind of like, you could say humanize her, but obviously she's not a human. But you know exactly what I mean. Anyway, Ignia, like in front of not the specific things I read from the fandoms, just because there's a lot of stuff I don't agree with, and there's like stuff that people complain about that if they understand things like power systems and actually like where characters stand in the verse, they would understand like why certain levels of characters are able to do things at in later portions of the story. For example, they mentioned like, well, it had so much for Ignia and Celine being equal, because they're saying like, well, Ignia just put Natsu and Suzaku on the floor, and he just no different attack from Natsu, when Natsu tanked an attack that Celine wasn't. There's a couple things in that. One, obviously, we know that Suzaku's attack doesn't, but she didn't have the same level of like she didn't have the same blockage and same like prowess in like handling that attack as Natsu would. But we know Celine could have just went in her dragon form and been fine. This was obviously her weaker form, but Natsu was able to outperform her weaker form. But this was Natsu with Dragon Force. Like, he's using his strongest thing. And that's the same thing with Suzaku, when he beat human Celine, he used his strongest thing. Both of them are like worn down already. They've used a good amount of magic. Obviously, they've been attacking each other with actual, like, they haven't had like a long fight where they've each used like 30 techniques, but they are like Natsu is using something he's never, like he's using a technique and a form he's never used like this before, but he is still, he's still, managing, but it's something that he is having to really express and gain a hold of as he's doing. Because I imagine like if you were Natsu and you came up with this at some point between Elantir and Rimachu Suzaku, and you've had Dragon Force you've been able to activate Dragon Force at will for over a year. So I assume that it would just feel like he's essentially just manifesting it in specific locations so the dragon scales block a lot of the damage. But it's like I wonder like how much actually like it would feel with difficulty wise to do that. I don't think it would be that crazy. It would probably be just kind of strange focusing to do it fast in battle as like the first time you're doing it. And probably why Natsu was relieved when he blocked the attack at the start of the fight. But Ignia isn't fighting them at their full power. He didn't take either of their strongest attacks. And Natsu and Suzaku both tanked the attack. So though the attack that that Ignia did, temporarily overpowered them, it didn't defeat them. It did damage. It just seemed to kind of like put them down and temporarily just kind of daze them. But it wasn't something that they had to worry too much about. Also, Natsu using fire on Ignia, and then like Suzaku saying, "Oh well, you can't use fire on a fire dragon," and then Natsu, "Well, should I learn water dragon magic?" I thought that was funny. I thought that was pretty funny, but the thing is, like Suzaku is wrong on a fundamental standpoint of how the power works, because the reason that that makes sense. He's a 5th gen. He didn't get taught by a dragon. He relatively should have got his Dragon Slayer abilities recently, because 5th gen would have to be the newest of all the types. So it would have to be within the last... I know Dragon Cry takes place shortly before Alvarez, so it can't be that much more than a handful over a year ago, a year and some months. But we don't know when that whole kingdom created the Quantum Knights, because we know 1st gen existed all the way back with Irene. We know 2nd gen became at some point when Laxus was a kid. Some point between the 7-year time skip going from part 1 to part 2, 3rd gen. So it could be anywhere between whenever 3rd gen happened and Dragon Cry, which is a good chunk of time. Again, another year plus. Potentially more, because you could say that maybe Sting and Rogue got it within the 7 years. Maybe it was only 3 years into the time skip or something. We don't know, but it's obviously it gives it a good area for that to exist. So he has to still be relatively new to dragon slaying magic. And it would make sense why the 5th gen people don't know as much. And here, again, because Natsu, logically speaking, if you were a fire dragon slayer, you're designed to fight a fire dragon. You fight him, you're going to be eating his fire, getting physically stronger, regaining magic and stamina. You're going to be becoming more powerful, and eventually you are going to just get to the point with Dragon Force and a higher level of power. Obviously we're talking about a character fighting somebody they can defeat, not Natsu at chapter 20 fights Ignia, but because fire dragon slayer. No, not what I mean. But you would eventually get your fire hotter with more power and more physical strength than whenever you're fighting, and then you'll be able to overtake them. I just thought that was something to mention, because obviously that's Suzaku and Natsu not having the best grasp on that makes sense. Natsu's not the smartest, Suzaku's not the most experienced with in terms of long-standing knowledge and information on dragon slaying magic. I don't expect him to be a wizard or a dictionary on the matter. But I do like that they're teaming up with Ignia just kind of lifting his hand up and melting that, completely vaporizing even. It's just gone. There's nothing there in that crater. There's no molten lava or anything. It's just incinerated, gone. Him just doing that when we really haven't seen anybody mess with the labyrinth material yet. We haven't seen any big attacks, because I'd be willing to bet that if Natsu used his Purgatory / Dragon Fire, he would have done damage like that. Or if, or more. I think pretty well more, considering they didn't even take that much damage. And then Suzaku didn't use his Black Purgatory slash like on the wall. He used it on Natsu, so we didn't see the damage of those in comparison to that. But I mean, like, that's their strongest of things versus Ignia literally just raising his hand. But again, they did tank it. That's something I think people aren't really bringing up in this scenario. Natsu has a heat resistance, but it's like, we know that there's a level to it, and like Ignia clearly is able to like exceed that level, whereas Suzaku just straight tanks it. Suzaku clearly is just like, it wasn't something he could just no-div, but it was something that he was able to get back up from after it knocked him down. So we were able to understand kind of just strong, not like at least that version beyond anything that they can handle. So I will say that like them teaming up, I figured this was gonna happen. This was inevitable because Natsu and Suzaku have very similar beliefs towards their guild, and we know that Suzaku respects his guild. He likes the people in his guild. He considers them as his allies. He doesn't seem as close as obviously Natsu is to Fairy Tail members, but Suzaku still seems to care about them. He still seems to want to avenge people in his guild, get them back. Like it was the old Fairy Tail thing of just like you have to repay anybody who has you 100-fold. You always got to give back way more damage than you receive, and I feel like Suzaku has that very similar kind of mindset. He's not going to let enemies of the guild just kind of like wander off consequence free. Whereas like that's kind of the same thing of like how Natsu is. So like them having that same mentality and the issue between them being way more of a misunderstanding, I knew it was just going to be a matter of time until they team up. It was just going to be like, when are they going to be able to put their differences aside? And Natsu, Suzaku, and Urza are they're three characters that could easily kind of like settle things down between each other, but they also can easily get things kind of more riled up. Whereas like someone like Gray or Lucy could, were fast passes for diplomacy, I think, or Wendy. But I knew that like if we could get some of them alone where they're not going to get in a hostile kind of scenario, that it was going to easily be, get down to, okay, team up. Because we know that these two characters don't have any real hostility towards each other. It's all towards like, our members of our guild got in fights. Like they're not murdering each other. I guess, Wraith was already a ghost, but like some of them have definitely tried to kill each other, but nobody's got each other otherwise killed yet. So it's like, it's more of a feud than like a blood feud. It's just kind of like, we got problems. We're not out to murder all of you, I guess, unless you're Kieran, swinging pockets of people. But it just to me seemed like, okay, well, this made sense because they wanted to keep Suzaku wanted to keep fighting. Again, I figured that would make sense as well. Not for them, but Natsu decides not to, which the logical reason why Natsu wouldn't want to, because with that another reason if that reason wasn't there, he probably would agree to just go back to fighting. But Ignia being loose, he knows his friends are in danger, as are Suzaku's friends. And they were able to pretty much kind of like mutually, like he calms Suzaku down and then put that whole like perspective of the situation in Suzaku's head. Suzaku then like wanted to team up. I thought it was like funny that Natsu at that point was like, yeah, I don't really want it. And then Suzaku has to kind of remind him what Natsu just put to him. And he's like, yeah, you're probably right. Okay, let's team up. The team fires thing, I was like, why did not, like the first thing I thought was like, why is it just fires? Like, shouldn't it have something to get both of you? Like, shouldn't it have maybe something to your hair color, or maybe like fire sword or something? But Suzaku does mention like, why is nothing of my name in there? I really like the dialogue between Natsu and Suzaku. I really enjoyed that. And again, I've mentioned it in my other reviews, but I've liked all of Diablos. I've enjoyed all of them. I think they've all been really fun. And then just like seeing some of these interactions, especially now, like all of them have had really intriguing interactions. You have like the goofiness of like Haku having a crush on Wendy. You have the whole cool new rivalry between Kieran and Laxus. We've got something brewing up between Misaki and Urza. We haven't got too much of it yet, but obviously we do have that in play at its starting point. So we know that is something that exists. And then the rivalry between Lucy and Kyria, which again I really liked. This was the fight that I wanted to get to the most. I mentioned that a couple chapters ago as well. I do know I brought that up. I'm actually really excited to see how this match plays out. The first bit, Lucy actually does a little bit better at the start than I thought. Like I figured Lucy was not going to be nearly as pressed against Kyria as she was against Mimi or she was against Kyria the first time, but like she's fighting her in base at the very start, which is actually really impressive. That's something I want to definitely give props to Lucy for, because I didn't think she was going to do that. Like the fight just kind of like begins, like before they start, like, you know, everyone's getting too hot because Ignia's doing igneous stuff, and Kyria's just kind of like mocking her, calling her weak, saying she wants to like fight all the strong people. She doesn't really want to mess with her. She's like mentioning Urza, Laxus. Like, I wonder if she knows that Natsu's the strongest character in the main cast. Like, Natsu's stronger than them, both of them. But I understand because, you know, she's fought both of them. That's kind of her current knowledge. You like think you should, like, she would have them like spy and get information on like an enemy group if they were you know, if they want to get this. So I feel like Scoleon definitely should have done some like recon and like went and got some info, like boxes or something back or something. But either way, then like starting the fight, Kyria just goes. I do like that Lucy does kind of confirm. She's like, you should really check to see if someone's a small fry. And I agree. I definitely agree. Like characters that end up calling people that they lose to weak at the start of the match just makes them look bad. I understand that Kyria fought Lucy before, so it makes sense that she would think that she's still really weak compared to her. But I mean, at the same time, Kyria is also extremely reckless. We know that Kyria is just like head in before she even thinks about how things are gonna go. She's just a very impulsive character, and we understand that. Like, so I can't hate on her character for it, because it's not like she's a new character and this is all we know about her. We know that how she is, so she has a track record again being recklessly impulsive. So we can definitely look at it and say like, oh well, she is going to probably just attack. She's not going to assess like Lucy's gotten clearly way stronger, but how much of that is she going to figure out before things are going to start getting pressed for her? And that's what went on in this chapter. And I like that Lucy was being a little bit more cocky and confident in how she talked. I really like that. Like, I figured Lucy was going to do good, but I didn't expect her to have as much of a kind of just like steady head kind of way that she was talking to her. She didn't seem nearly as in like kind of like pressed in a situation, kind of panicking, which I really appreciated. It obviously shows off Lucy's growth, Lucy's skills and abilities, and not just from a power level standpoint, from a mentality standpoint. She is at this point gained a lot more confidence as a fighter and in herself. And I think that was one of the big things with Mimi, because I still believe that like Lucy wasn't fighting to the best of her capabilities in that first round, and that was what screwed her over. She was trying to fight more similarly to other people in her group, more like a battle mage, whereas she is a casting, like, spellcaster who has battle mage forms. Lucy's biggest thing is that she has like a lot of ability, she's intelligent, she can combo a lot of things. So seeing her at the start of this, I will say again, super impressive for her to be able to dodge Kyria's attacks in base. I didn't think she was going to do that. Like, I legitimately didn't think that she was going to be able to kind of like start this out of base. Kyria's not going all out. Like, that's obviously something to mention. But like, even playful Kyria, Lucy base dodging her is, I will say, really impressive. People were complaining about the whole, like, like Lucy's clothes getting cut. And they got to look at it with the context, because that's the thing that always bothers me. Like, it's not like it doesn't get used, I think, nearly as much as people say it does. It's mostly just because it mostly happens to Lucy. But you gotta look in the context of it. In the first match, Lucy had this happen to her from Kyria against her current opponent. Kyria did that to her. But when Kyria did it to her, Lucy was in a higher form, and like Lucy was using like some of her stronger spells, like Aquametry and stuff. Here, Lucy is in her base, and she's just dodging. You have to think about like where Lucy was at in the previous situation and the current one. And then you have Lucy again. Lucy's star dresses they're OP in the fact that she can just gain the skills and abilities at her level without any form of training. But I mean, like, it's training in that, but we know how her power works. Like, you know, again, context and knowing how she works makes it so it doesn't seem as cheap in the idea of like she becomes a pretty skilled and powerful swordswoman with absolutely zero sword training. So she puts on her Cancer star dress and has the two big twin blades and is fighting Kyria. She's matching Kyria at this point. And this is where I said it was important to really think of the context of where she was at. Because we know Lucy's like bigger level of power. We know, like, you know, base Lucy, we have her star dresses, we have star dress mixes, and then we have stuff like erratometria and her bigger spells. Because like Lucy's biggest things are in spells she has, not nearly as much in just straight forms and in just straight summoning now. But in her base, in the first round, she got her all clothes and stuff cut up while in her star dress, whereas current Lucy is getting it cut up in base, but star dress, after getting her into like a little sword clash with Kyria, ended up cutting up all of her clothes. And I really like this. And you got to look at, again, the context and hear me out on this and why this is important. This has happened to Lucy a good amount of times throughout the series, the whole series. I'm not saying it happens every 10 minutes, but Lucy has gotten into a lot of scenarios where her clothes get, her clothes disappear or get destroyed or something. I've always been fine with it because I like the fact that Lucy can be like, she can get gagged, fan service, but also can have like really good character development, really good scenes, really great interactions. Like Lucy can fit into most areas of like general display for a character and still come out on top. I've always enjoyed that she can get clowned on, she can look goofy and silly, but then a couple chapters later, we can have Lucy back in control. She can be showing off her intelligence or her summoning skills. Like, there's way more that she can do at that point. I've always enjoyed that about Lucy. But in the first match when she did that, and again, all these other matches, Lucy ends up getting her clothes shredded, and she's in a scenario where she ends up not looking her best. So you can look at it and say like, well, okay, well, whoever she's fighting or whatever she's fighting, it put her in a spot where she got not like fighting clapped, but she got clapped in a spot, obviously, that, you know, put her in that like near nude situation. But here, she's doing it not only to somebody else, but to somebody that did it to her. And she's being cocky when she does it too. She's like, oh, can you change your clothes? Because the thing about Lucy now, once she gains Star Dress, as long as she has magic, if she loses her clothes, bam, Star Dress puts on another set of clothing. Because she has a built-in way, as long as she can use her magic, she can keep herself from just being outright naked. So Kyria, I don't know what Kyria's gonna do, because Kyria doesn't have any clothing abilities, I would assume. I mean, she could know basic requip. I'd be okay with that, because like basic requip is like a very, very kind of like okay spell that like, or it's different when like people like Urza and Biska like specialize it, whereas like if you just had like requip to equip t-shirts and pants or something, not like powerful battle weaponry. But yeah, this just looks good for Lucy in general. I think this makes Lucy's stocks for her level in the series, but also her current standing, looks tremendously better. It shows, because like Lucy not only being able to do this in like barely putting an effort in just her Cancer star dress is impressive, but Lucy being able to dodge the attacks in her base is really impressive. Because like one thing that there's like Fairy Tail doesn't have nearly as much of a problem with it, but like think about like series where you have characters who are really powerful with like forms and stuff, but their base is actually pretty weak, which is understandable because their base is supposed to be their kind of their standard form. But a lot of series you have way more of like, yeah, their upper forms are good, so you like in a fight it's like they have to get these upper forms, but if they end up fighting in their base, they're gonna get thrashed. Because it's like you could have a base where it's like still strong, but it's not gonna be too much against any big people. It's still capable against most of the verse, but it's like you could have one of those ones where it's like, yeah, I'm top 5 with my strongest form, but like I'm top 200 in base. Maybe like exaggerating her a little bit, but you know what I mean? Those characters that in their base form, they just don't seem that powerful. But it's actually impressive for Lucy. I mean, she's not OP in base, but I mean, like, it's impressive that she was able to do something at that level in her base, because it shows again her level of speed and reaction ability. Because that's something that is downplayed about Lucy a lot. Is like she isn't a speedster. Like Gray's ability of like casting and attacking stuff has always been emphasized in how fast he is. But Lucy's always had fast reaction speed and casting speed. So though she isn't the fastest character, she's always had her own ways that like her speed has been emphasized. And again, this is a good time to show it, because this is a character that kept up with Urza. So Kyria doing this level of damage against Lucy, and I can't even say like level of damage when it seems like Lucy is about even with her, at least right now. I mean, Kyria has to put in more effort. Lucy has other dresses. She has more. She has her Star Dress mixes. She's got her Gemini Aronometria counter, and we don't know if Lucy's come up with any new spells. I feel like Lucy could easily have a new spell. We know that she invented like Aquametria. Like, she could invent a new version for one of her other Star Dresses. Like, say she does something with Aquarius and Leo and makes like a shining water version. Like, combines just straight like Aquametria and Aronometria into like some newer, higher version. I don't know. Like, there's more to what she can do and what she can pull out, because Lucy's also really smart. And the fact that Lucy invented her own spell, I assume that she's like thinking about like other ways that she can invent spells, because her Star Dress mix new spells are different than say than Aquametria. Actually, I guess Aquametria is kind of in it, but I mean, that's something she uses in just her. Like, she doesn't need Star Dress mix for it. She can just use it. So it's kind of similar, but not the same. It's a bit different. At the same time, though, like, how difficult would it be for her to invent another new spell? Because like hers are mostly just inventing new attack versions of stuff she already had, which, though, obviously is going to be useful. But if she can start pulling out more of those combos, the fight further, I'm guessing we're gonna see Kyria start ramping up her effort. I don't think she's gonna use Dragon Force. I could be wrong, but I feel like Kyria going into Dragon Force will be really strange, like, because like there's so many things that I think it would be odd about it. Like, one, it'd be throwing away Kyria, not like throwing away Kyria's character, but you're pretty much setting Kyria up to get. Setting Kyria up to potentially get killed off permanently, because in multiple senses. Because if she goes into Dragon Force, loses control, becomes a mindless dragon, we don't know what's going to happen to her, if she's ever going to come back. And then with someone like Igni around, he could easily kill her at that point. Like, there's like an easy potential death flag. I don't think so, because also, like, I assume their fight's going to continue from this next one. I don't think that she's just going to use Dragon Force. We'll see. It's like Kyria. I know Kyria is reckless, but I don't think she's stupid enough to do it, because she has to at least know that 5th gen Dragon Force doesn't seem to have like a way to come back, unless your magic is just fully wiped or like pretty much pulled out of your body from as we saw like with Irene. They're gonna transform. So I just don't really see it happening right now. Like, the whole thing with 5th gen Dragon Force is it is a all-in, no going back, unless some form of specific outside interference helps you and saves you. Then you are going to turn into a dragon, and we don't know if they even ever regain their sanity. It's like Endura from Seven Deadly Sins. It's the easy one to compare it to. I know there's other examples throughout fiction, but it's just one, because Fairy Tail and Seven Deadly Sins are the same magazine. Easy to use comparison. It's one of those ones, because it's like you're gonna, you don't know if you're gonna keep your consciousness. You don't know what's gonna happen. It's just this all in, I gotta win kind of thing. I need to eliminate the opponent in front of me. But I don't think Kyria would do it also, because it's like, does she care about beating Lucy more than continuing pretty much her life? Because Lucy's not gonna kill her. And I'd be surprised if Kyria thought Lucy would kill her. I'd be really surprised if Kyria would be in a scenario where she thinks that Lucy's going to kill her, so it's like, well, I might as well use this. I don't think so. But we also know it's forbidden. That's like the thing that I think is like the the whole thing with like Kyria is like she would easily just break the rule, but I don't think I do not think she's dumb enough to do it, because it's not a scenario that would be good for her. Because then it's like, well, why don't you use it against Laxus or something? Anyway, yeah, so that fight, I want to know how, like, what Lucy's next steps are, because like the Cancer Star Dress was very basic in like what I believed would show up for the Kyria fight. I want to see like Aries Star Dress. I want to see like a Star Dress mix that's new or something. I don't need to see like her go into Star Dress mix super form and fight the whole time like a Super Saiyan. I just want to see Lucy do as Lucy does and switch between stuff, use her abilities, and capitalize on her utility-based fighting style and variety-based fighting style that lets her kind of think around her opponent, try and figure out how she can approach them and get different things set up. So we'll see. Kyria definitely has to start putting in more effort and acknowledge Lucy's strength. I'm hoping if we get a really good fight for one. I'm hoping this is like the Kyria fight, because like I gotta keep in mind, a good fight for Lucy is a good fight for Lucy. I'll always be hyped for that. Like anytime a main cast member gets a good fight, I'm gonna be pretty happy. But as I've mentioned, I like the members of Diablos. Kyria is probably my least liked member, but like that's still like not a bad thing when I still like all of them. But Kyria doesn't have a whole lot of screen time where she's looking good in fights, because a lot of times she's like getting frozen by Gray, she's getting run over by Laxus, she's getting pushed back by Urza. Like, we know that she's not the strongest, but we know she's capable. This is again also like the best fight for her, because pretty much everybody else in the Dogra Mag Labyrinth, I think, would clap her pretty quick. I think everybody else would beat her relatively easily. Because the thing about Lucy that's like a big advantage for Kyria is that, like, though Lucy is powerful, Lucy is a caster, whereas like everybody else are pretty much combat wizards, especially Dragon Slayers, like being like the most combat wizard thing in Fairy Tail. So she has a little bit of a advantage for her in the standpoint of like this is the one opponent probably that isn't going to just, again, I think, run over her, because I don't think Wendy would have that much of a problem, because like hypnosis and stuff, Wendy's immune to status effects, not gonna work. Wendy's already fought a powerful blade user with Easel, not the same level, but I mean, like, Wendy should also be relatively around, and we know that Wendy was able to defeat a not trying as hard Haku, but still like being able to damage him like that regardless should be above Kyria. So I would assume that like that Sky Drill is taking out Kyria. Yeah, that's just the last kind of bits I want to talk about, because like I'm very intrigued for the Kyria fight and the Kyria Lucy fight, and I want to see some techniques from Kyria. I want to see her just kind of like using her magic, seeing what she can do, seeing what Lucy can do. I just want to have like a nice, I'm hoping 2-chapter fight between them, like just 2 chapters. I want to see them battle, and then we'll see what's going on with Misaki and Urza. I'm fine. Like, we already got through Natsu and Suzaku. We got through that first, and it was the shortest fight. It was only really 1 chapter, and obviously it wasn't a full-scale fight. It was really just kind of like the opening to a fight that got interrupted. Whereas like Misaki and Urza, I can't wait for that. I want to see the Kyria and Lucy fight. I think, all right, now this is the one that at least set up until we get back to Laxus and Kieran. Once we get back to Laxus and Kieran, I want to see Laxus and Kieran. But until then, I really want to see what's going on between Lucy and Kyria. So we'll see how things go. I think actually the last thing I'll mention, the last thing I really want to see is like how Lucy's gonna win. Like, what is she gonna do to put Kyria down? She could use Aranometry again, and that's her biggest attack. But I kind of want Lucy to invent like a new ultimate move. I would really like it if she worked on Aranometria to invent something even higher. But anyway, what if she could, instead of Star Dress, like she went and enchanted Aranometria, but instead of casting it, she absorbed the magic into herself, kind of like she does with Star Dress. So she's just intaking the magic to give herself some form of new form. Like if she had Star Dress Aranometria or something, that would be really cool. But anyway, other than that, comment below, thumbs up the video, befriend the like button, subscribe button, and check out my other videos. Other than that, appreciate everyone's already listening, and appreciate everyone's already subscribed. Thank you for listening. Bye.